hope that you in the audience have some questions. I think we've had three very complimentary and clear presentations.
All right.
Lots and lots of challenges ahead. So, lady over there, can you say who you are and if you want to address your question to a particular person or to anyone?
My name is Jenny. I'm from BBUK Landscape Architects. We just recently had a client review our tree species versus the foundation design. And the question really is, how do you justify a client to have a proposed tree oak that would require a great big foundation and would incur cost to a client in this scenario? So any ideas are welcome.
Okay. Kenton, do you want to take that? So how do you persuade your client to have an oak tree in their development?
Yeah.
How would you persuade a client to have an oak tree in a development? I think it's the question. Okay. Is that right? Yeah.
I guess it depends on the site as well, how much space there is for the oak tree to reach maturity, because the last thing you want to do is have your oak tree and then from year 20 onwards have to keep pruning that tree for the next how many years. So it very much depends on the site and thinking about the space the tree is going to need at maturity, and is it the right place for that oak tree? Yeah.
And I would recommend that you look at the iTree Eco website as well, which I'm sure you'll find helpful. Lady there.
Hello, this is another question for Kenton. I have been a tree warden for Royal Borough of Kensington, Chelsea, and I was very interested to see the mapping of the trees in Ealing. I wondered if they were trees which had been given TPOs or whether it was done through aerial survey, which I believe can now be done of the canopy using drones.
Those trees that you saw there for Ealing were all of the council trees on the council tree inventory. So
they weren't private, because Kensington Chelsea's got a lot of communal gardens which are privately owned, and the residents cut down trees at will.
Yeah.
Whereas I've suggested that we should do an aerial survey of the trees, and that the council should keep an eye on them with that method.
Yeah. So in Ealing, they and I can talk to you afterwards as well if you like, because it was quite a complex study. They looked at aerial mapping and the council tree inventory and did a sample survey, and the sample survey did look at trees on public and private properties, but the individual trees that you see were just the council trees because they've been mapped already. Yeah.
Just out of interest, we're developing a tool for Ivory Coast, which every 12 days uses the radar satellites to detect tree loss, so that because there's a lot of expansion of cocoa production and other things going on there, and they want to know what's going on in their deforestation, so it's lots of tropical forests. And they need to know quickly so that they can send people in and try and stop the tree loss.
Right. Thank you. The lady at the back.
Hi there, this one's just for Dr. Bruce. We were just wondering where you got your grass from, if they were all from like the Welsh government sites or whether it's a combination.
Yeah, they're from my laptop, but they're actually on the Welsh Government's website. Yeah, you can find them if you go to Welsh Government Sustainable Drainage, there's a link to all the evidence reports on there, and they're in there.
Thank you.
Robin and Bruce, you both talked about the
importance... Can you say who you are,
please?
Oh,
sorry. My name is Fiona Brenner. I'm from Groundwork London. You both talked about the possibility of unlocking health funding, bringing that into green spaces. Something we are looking at a lot, and we have quite a lot of funding from public health sources for different types of interventions. And we're looking at how we can group that together, and got some particular ideas of how we do that at the moment. I was just wondering what you're finding is closest to the holy grail of being able to explicitly find that. You mentioned some particular client groups that might be getting towards nice recognition or what have you, but a bit more on that would be appreciated.
So my understanding is, there's physical health and mental health, and physical health is slightly better developed in terms of the evidence base. In health commissioning groups, about 80% of their spending is on 5 disease categories, and they all can be mitigated with physical activity. So it's about demonstrating that you can increase physical activity, really. That's the area where you're most likely to be able to tap health budgets at the moment. The strategies of some of the health commissioning bodies is basically people will get ill, most of them, and you want to do, and many of these diseases might kill the person eventually, and you want to compress the treatment period as much as possible. You won't stop them getting ill, but you want to delay the onset of the illness or the severity of it where they have to be treated and then looked after with lots of money. So the physical activity basically delays the point at which you start having to spend money through the health service. So you have to be able to demonstrate that you're targeting those people who are susceptible to those 5 disease groups and increasing their activity. And if you can do that, then you have a chance of getting some funding.
If I could add to that, Public Health England recently did a very thorough review of the evidence of things in the built environment and how they affect health. And in fact, what came out very strongly was that the evidence around the benefits of green infrastructure on mental health is incredibly strong. And it's worth having a look at that evidence. And the Green Infrastructure Partnership Conference this year on the 12th of July will be looking at green infrastructure and health. But it'd be great to talk to you about that.
Hello, Alistair Scott from Northumbria University and Natural Environment Research Council. A question to all three of you, really, because it's kind of your reflections as people that are doing research. In a sense, you're presenting all about some research that you've done. There wasn't much about how you have possibly influenced academic research to actually be addressing questions that really people in policy and practice want answered. And I was just wondering if you could comment on that, if there is a disconnect, or whether in fact your voices are actually influencing the research funders on that side, given the title that's there.
I mean, just quickly on that, I mean, we work with academics all the time, and it's really important. I think for kind of economists like Robin and myself, often we're kind of asked to come up with valuations of these costs and benefits, and the valuation bit is often this bit right at the end, right? And you've got your kind of intervention, what you're planning to do over here, and there's a whole area in the middle that we, you know, as economists, we don't necessarily understand very well, and that's where we kind of need other experts to work with as well. So if you're intervening in an area by introducing some green infrastructure, that has an impact on how people move and live in that area, and that has an impact on, you know, their health outcomes. And then the last bit almost very often is how we value those changes in health outcomes. So I think there's better evidence over here, but often the bit in the middle is kind of where we often look to academia and work with them wherever possible to try and improve that evidence.
Hi, Simon Petley from Enviromarket. We link investors with natural capital, positive investment opportunities. So it's a question mainly, I think, for Robin. Robin, you spoke about place-based strategic investment and outline KICs and various areas. I wondered if you could say a bit more about where the investment for those comes from. Is that mainstream investment? Are banks going to be investing in these places? Or?
I don't think it's very mainstream at the moment. Well, it's not at the moment. So it's mostly impact investors at the moment. So people who want an almost market return, but happy to take a little bit less or a bit more risk in exchange for impact. And I don't see that changing very quickly. But it would be possible if enough people adopt those models to aggregate up and bring in institutional investors. But I mean, that's some years down the track.
Okay. Any more? Yes, gentleman over there.
Adam Vickers from Square Yard, Landscape Architects. we work on quite a lot of out-of-town retail estate projects, and quite often we're having to argue trees versus the obscurity of the signage. Given some of the evidence that there is for the value of the trees, do you think we should have minimum tree number standards in the same way that we do for cycle parking spaces on these sites, so that we don't get these expanses of tarmac that we've got at the moment?
Yeah, and there are some examples in the TDAG publication, Trees in the Townscape, where different places have adopted different methods to look at that. So in Bristol, they've got, I think it's a 10-for-1 tree replacement scheme if trees are removed. Other places have set canopy cover goals. So in High Wycombe, they've measured canopy cover, and that's going through at the moment with their local planning guidance, that if a developer comes in, they can see what the existing tree cover is in that area, and whether they want more in that area or whether it's okay. And they will then say, well, okay, you can develop that, but we want a 10% increase in canopy cover, or we want the canopy maintained, or it's fine to develop it without any, of that.
Right. I think we're beginning to run out of time. Is there any last question before we draw to a close? No. Can I encourage you all to visit the Trees and Design Action Group stand at H130, where there will be a lot of useful resources. Thank you very much for coming along to today's event, and I'd just like to thank our speakers for their excellent presentations.